When I collapsed at my graduation, the doctors called my parents 67 times. They never came. Days later, still hooked to machines, I saw 65 missed calls and one text from my father. "We need you. Answer immediately. Not are you alive. Not we're coming." They needed me. That was all. The microphone hit the floor before I did. I remember that with a clarity that still feels unnatural, like my brain saved the wrong part first. The hollow metallic crack against the stage. The feedback shriek slicing through the Hawthorne University auditorium. 3,000 people inhaling at once. I was halfway through my valedictorian speech, paragraph 4, the part about resilience, and how some of us had to earn every inch of the ground we stood on. I remember gripping the sides of the podium because my right hand had started to go numb. I remember thinking, don't make this weird, just finish the sentence. Then the lights stretched, the ceiling tilted sideways. My knees folded like someone had cut the strings inside them. The last thing I saw was my grandfather standing up in the second row. Then nothing. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU at St. Marcus Medical Center with a blood pressure cuff squeezing my left arm, a nurse shining a penlight into my eyes, and my grandfather's hand wrapped around my right hand so tightly it felt like a cast. He was still wearing the suit he had pressed for graduation. Dark navy, same silver tie, same pocket square I had helped him fold that morning, because his fingers shook when he was nervous, and he pretended they didn't. "There he is," he said, so quietly it sounded like he was talking to himself. It took another 20 minutes before I understood what had happened. Glioblastoma, a brain tumor roughly the size of a golf ball sitting in my right temporal lobe. Dr. Lena Ortiz explained it had probably been growing for 1 to 2 years. Hiding behind headaches, I blamed on stress. Exhaustion, I blamed on 3 jobs. And memory slips, I blamed on finals. Emergency craniotomy. 4 hours and 11 minutes on the table. Significant blood loss. The hospital called my parents 67 times. They boarded their flight to Paris anyway. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what they took from me, because context matters. My name is Ethan Mercer. I was 22 that March, the first person in my immediate family to graduate from a 4-year university. Valedictorian at Hawthorne University with a 3.94 GPA in biomedical engineering. I did it in 4 years while working 30 to 40 hours a week across 3 jobs. Opening shift barista at a campus coffee shop. Weekend lab assistant at a private research facility, organic chemistry tutor for freshmen who cried over reaction mechanisms and paid me in cash or campus meal swipes. I ate a lot of ramen. I slept 5 hours on good nights. I wore the same cracked dress shoes through senior year because replacing them meant not fixing the brakes on my car. I applied for every scholarship I could find and won 3. Enough to cover about 40% of tuition. The rest, I assumed, came from a tuition fund my grandfather had set up. That assumption was the central lie of my adult life. My family looked respectable from the outside, which is usually where people stopped looking. My father, Richard Mercer, 54, was a financial advisor, the kind of man trusted to manage other people's futures, while quietly setting fire to his own. My mother, Caroline, 51, was an interior designer with expensive taste and a renovation habit that seemed to reproduce on its own. My older brother, Blake, 26, was my parents' first choice for everything. Blake's baseball games were family events. Blake's school plays got flowers. Blake's acceptance to a mid-tier state school got a catered backyard party and a rented tent. When I got a full academic scholarship to Hawthorne, my mother glanced up from fabric samples and said, "That's great, buddy. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because patterns matter." And this pattern had been running for 22 years before it finally showed me its teeth. My grandfather, Arthur Hayes, my mother's father, was a different story entirely. He had built a small machine parts business from nothing in the late 70s, sold it before the recession, and then spent the next 20 years living like a man who had nothing to prove. He drove a 12-year-old Buick. He brought turkey sandwiches to meetings with bankers. He fixed his own porch steps and tipped waitresses like he was trying to make up for the rest of the world. My grandmother Margaret died before I was born, but she had left something behind for me, a fund, specifically for me, established before my birth, managed quietly for more than 2 decades, grown into enough money to buy a house outright, start a company, or, as Grandpa would later say, stand in front of no man with your hat in your hand. I didn't know that while I was eating ramen and choosing between car repairs and textbooks. My father knew. He had always known. The first thing I noticed, once I was conscious enough to notice anything, was that Grandpa looked old in a way he hadn't at 7 that morning. He was 76 and still strong, but 3 days in a hospital chair had carved something into his face. His suit was wrinkled. His silver tie sat crooked. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw because he hadn't gone home long enough to shave. They know. He said once he was sure I could track him. They chose not to come. I opened my mouth. Don't, he said gently. Save your voice. Just listen. He told me about the hospital calls, the ignored messages, the flight they boarded anyway. Then he lifted my phone where I could see Blake's Instagram. Posted while I was in surgery, my mother and brother under the Eiffel Tower. Champagne raised, matching designer scarves. Caption finally, Paris, no stress, no drama. A comment said, "You deserve this," my mother replied. "We absolutely do." The missed calls came on day 4. I had been moved out of the ICU into a private room with one narrow window facing a concrete parking structure. Dr. Ortiz had already gone over the pathology report twice, carefully, like she knew exactly how much terror a person could absorb before the word stopped meaning anything. Aggressive tumor, radiation and chemotherapy within the week, 90% of the visible mass removed. The remaining 10% would decide too much. Grandpa had gone to the cafeteria because I made him promise to eat. My nurse had just changed my IV bag. I picked up my phone. 65 missed calls. 31 from Dad, 22 from Mom, 12 from Blake. No voicemails. One text from my father at 6:47 a.m. "We need you. Answer immediately." I stared at it for a long time. Not "we're coming." Not "we're sorry." Not even "are you alive?" "We need you." The subject of the sentence was them. My hands were very still. That was the first thing I noticed. Not shaking, not clenched, just still on top of the hospital blanket, like they belonged to someone waiting for instructions. When Grandpa came back with a paper cup of soup, he clearly had not eaten, I said. "They've been calling." He sat down slowly. "I know. The text says they need me." Something moved across his face then. Not surprise, not even anger. More like a man bracing himself before opening a door he already knew had fire behind it. "They found out about the money," he said. He explained it in pieces over the next 2 hours. The way you explain a car wreck to someone still strapped to a hospital bed. My grandmother Margaret had created the fund before I was born. By the time I turned 22, it had grown to just over $340. 000. It was mine, not my parents', not the family's, mine. 4 years earlier, when I started Hawthorne, my father called Grandpa and said he needed help paying my tuition. "He said you were struggling," Grandpa said. He said he couldn't cover the full amount. The first check was $41,200. Full freshman tuition plus room and board. My tuition that year had been covered by scholarships. Room and board came from my campus job, and a miserable summer working warehouse inventory from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Dad cashed the check in 3 days. Later, bank records would show the money went into a renovation account. Marble countertops, a kitchen island. The primary bathroom remodel my mother posted on Facebook with the caption, "Finally, getting the home we deserve." The second check was $38,700. Dad said I needed lab fees, books, a better laptop, emergency expenses. That year, I used a laptop with a battery so dead it had to stay plugged into the wall. I skipped meals to afford lab materials. The third check was $29,500, supposedly for senior year costs. Blake's engagement party happened 6 weeks later. The fourth was $44,000. Dad called it a graduation fund. I almost dropped out that semester over a $400 car repair. Total, taken $153,400. My own money had paid for stone counters, custom tile, champagne, and Blake's parties while I worked 3 jobs and ate ramen over a sink. I looked at the parking structure outside my window. A gull sat on the concrete ledge, completely indifferent. "How much is left?" I asked. "Just over $280,000, Grandpa said, "and it transfers directly to you." They arrived on day 5. I heard my mother before I saw her. Heels on hospital linoleum. Fast, confident, expensive. The sound of a woman who had already decided she belonged in every room she entered. She came in first. Ahead of my father, ahead of Blake, arms open before she'd even cleared the doorway. "Oh, Ethan," she said. The hug was already happening, whether I agreed to it or not. She folded herself around me, perfume and silk scarf, and airport air pressing into my hospital gown. I didn't lift my arms. I didn't turn my head. She had to complete the whole performance around a body that refused to participate. "We came as fast as we could, baby," she whispered into my hair. "The Louvre was open yesterday," I said. "I saw the photos." She pulled back. For half a second, Her face showed the machinery behind the expression, the calculation, the flicker of irritation before the mother mask dropped back into place. Ethan, we didn't know how serious it was. The hospital called 67 times. We were overseas. It was complicated. Dr. Lena Ortiz called you herself 4 times, I said. The attending neurosurgeon, 4 times. My father stepped in then, quiet and careful, wearing the same tired, reasonable face he used with clients when the market turned against them. Son, he said, we failed you. I know that. I know you know. His mouth tightened slightly. We're here now, he said. Then Blake walked in, carrying shopping bags. Not 1, 3 stiff paper boutique bags with rope handles, the kind you don't bring into an oncology recovery room unless the part of your brain responsible for shame was never installed properly. He glanced up from his phone. You look better than I expected, he said. Grandpa made a sound from the chair in the corner. Small, involuntary, dangerous. I looked at Blake. I had brain surgery. I know, he said, like I had corrected him on a technicality. It was scary when Mom told me, but, you look fine. Anyway, we cut the trip short by 2 days, so we're here. Something in me went cold enough to become useful. Sit down, I said. My mother blinked. Excuse me, all of you. Sit down. Maybe it was the monitors. Maybe it was the bandage still wrapped around my head. Maybe it was Grandpa sitting in the corner, with one hand on his cane, and murder in his posture. Whatever it was. They sat. My father took the soft approach first. He always did. I think emotions are very high right now, he said. You've been through something traumatic, and we should all take a breath before anyone says something they can't take back. You collected 4 checks from Grandpa in my name, I said. The room went still. Dad didn't move. Mom's fingers tightened around her purse strap. Blake finally looked up from his phone completely. I kept going. 4 years. $153,400. You said it was for my tuition, my room and board, my lab fees, my graduation expenses. Ethan, Dad said. My tuition was covered by scholarships I earned. My housing was covered by work I did. I tutored freshmen until midnight and opened a coffee shop at 5 in the morning, while my own money paid for Mom's marble countertops. My mother's face flushed. That is not fair. No, I said. It wasn't. Dad leaned forward, palms open, voice low. It was never that simple. The household had expenses. We made choices as a family. As a family, Grandpa said. It was the first time he had spoken. One phrase, no volume, absolute temperature. Dad looked at him and immediately looked away. That money was designated for Ethan's education and future, Grandpa said. Not your kitchen, not Blake's engagement party, not Paris. It wasn't like that, my father said. It was theft. Grandpa said. The word landed without drama, which made it worse. My mother changed tactics. I watched it happen. I had watched her do it my whole life, deny, soften, redirect, bleed. Her eyes filled. Do you have any idea what it was like for me? She asked. I stared at her. Right now, every time I looked at you, she said, voice breaking. I saw her. I knew before she said the name. Margaret, my mother, your grandmother. She made me feel worthless for 30 years. Nothing I did was enough. No room I decorated, no dinner I hosted, no life I built. And then you came along with her eyes, her stubbornness. That same way of looking at people like you already knew the truth. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. I know it wasn't fair. I know you were just a child, but sometimes I couldn't look at you without feeling small again. Part of me understood it. A small, tired part of me that had spent 22 years trying to solve the equation of why. The rest of me remembered being 8 years old, standing in the hallway with a science fair ribbon in my hand, while my mother walked past me to ask Blake how his game went. I'm not her, I said. I never was. My mother covered her mouth. You punished your son for a dead woman's sins. No one spoke. Then Blake, because silence had apparently become too heavy for him, said, okay, but what are we supposed to do now? I looked at him, really looked at him. His designer jacket, his fresh haircut, his Paris shopping bags leaning against the wall beside my ivy pole. You can start by shutting up, for once. He did. My mother cried harder after that, but not in the way people cry when they are sorry. It was the kind of crying that still wanted to be witnessed, still wanted the room to rearrange itself around her pain, for a second. I almost hated myself for noticing that. Then I remembered I was the one with staples in my skull. You don't understand what she did to me, Mom said. No, I said, I probably don't. She controlled everything. She made me feel like every choice I made was cheap or stupid or embarrassing. And you decided the best place to put that was on me. Her face crumpled. I didn't decide it. That makes it worse, I said, because if you had decided, maybe one day you could have undecided. Dad shifted in his chair. Ethan, your mother is trying to explain. No, I said, turning to him. She's trying to explain why it happened. That is not the same as taking responsibility for it. He went quiet. That was my father's gift silence at exactly the moment a decent man would speak. You watched it, I said, for 22 years. You watched her look through me. You watched Blake get celebrated for breathing, while I had to win awards just to be noticed. And you said nothing, because saying something would have cost you. His jaw worked once. That's not fair. You stole from me. He looked at the floor. There it was, his version of honesty, not confession, not apology. Just the absence of denial, when denial was no longer useful. Mom reached toward my blanket. I moved my hand away. The motion was small, but she reacted like I had slammed a door. I loved you, she whispered. I believe you loved the idea of being the kind of mother who loved me, I said. But that never made it to me. Grandpa's hand tightened around the top of his cane. My mother stared at me, like she was finally seeing the shape of the damage, and realizing it had her fingerprints on it. Grandpa reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. It was the ordinary kind with a metal clasp, the kind used for tax papers and old photographs, and things people don't realize can split a family open. He placed it on the bed beside my left hand with careful precision. This is yours, he said. The transfer was filed this morning. The account is in your name only. My mother's eyes locked onto the envelope. I had seen people look at food that way, at oxygen, at the last open exit in a burning room. Ethan, she said carefully, whatever is in there, we are still family. We should discuss this together. No, the word came out flat. She blinked, like she genuinely had not expected it to be that easy for me. Dad leaned forward. Son, nobody is saying mistakes weren't made, but involving lawyers will only make this uglier than it needs to be. It got ugly when you cashed the first check. His face changed then, not much, just enough for me to see the man underneath the father costume. Grandpa spoke before Dad could. Marcus Reed is filing a civil claim Monday morning. My father went pale. Marcus Reed was 62. A former county prosecutor who had spent 26 years in estate and civil law. He was the kind of attorney who did not raise his voice because paper could do it for him, for what Blake asked. Grandpa looked at him, for the misappropriation of designated educational funds. Dad stood halfway, then seemed to remember where he was, and sat back down. Arthur, this is insane. No, Grandpa said. It is documented. I picked up the envelope and opened it with fingers that felt strangely steady. Inside were copies, bank records, the original checks, memo lines indicating educational use, phone logs showing Dad's calls to Grandpa before each request, tuition statements proving my scholarships had covered the costs he claimed to be paying, contractor invoices, renovation receipts, insurance submissions from the bathroom remodel, dates, amounts, names, a paper trail so clean it almost looked polite. We have the checks, I said. We have the call records. We have the receipts for the kitchen, the bathroom, Blake's party, and the Paris charges. Blake's head snapped up. My party, you benefited from it, I said. That doesn't mean you planned it. He looked down. That was the closest thing to self-awareness I had ever seen on his face. Mom's voice thinned. You've been planning this. Grandpa started verifying things in March, I said. He was going to tell me after graduation. I touched the bandage on my head. Then I fell. Dad looked at Grandpa. You would destroy your own family over money. Grandpa's face did not move. No, Richard, you did that. I'm just keeping records. My phone buzzed on the blanket. Everyone looked at it like it might explode. I turned the screen over. An unknown number, local area code. For the first time in 5 days, I smiled. The call was from Claire Bautista, a research coordinator with the National Neuro-Oncology Research Collaborative. I had applied 8 months earlier for a 2-year fellowship studying treatment-resistant glioblastoma. I wrote the application at 1:13 a.m. after a 6-hour coffee shift, sitting on my dorm floor because my desk was covered in lab notes and unpaid bills. Claire told me I had been accepted. The fellowship included full health insurance, a $58,000 annual stipend, and a place in Dr. Ortiz's ongoing clinical trial. The same doctor managing my tumor would also become my research lead. Dr. Ortiz recommended you personally, Claire said. She wanted you to know she doesn't do that often. I thanked her and said I would call back once I had the details in front of me. When I set the phone down, my mother was staring. Good news, she asked. Yes, I said. I didn't tell them what it was, not to punish them, not to be cruel, just because, for the first time in my life, something good belonged to me before it belonged to the room. Marcus Reed filed the civil claim Monday morning. I wasn't there. I was still in a hospital bed watching a documentary about deep-sea fish, which felt appropriate in a way I didn't have the energy to explain. Creatures living in total darkness, building their own light because the world had not provided any. The claim was for $153,400 plus legal fees and documented consequential damages. Marcus included 4 years of unnecessary employment, financial stress, and educational hardship caused by my father's misappropriation of funds specifically designated for my future. By end of business Monday, my father had retained an attorney. By Tuesday morning, that attorney had contacted Marcus to discuss a private resolution. Marcus called me after lunch. "What did you say?" I asked. "See you Thursday," he said. That was it. 3 words. No performance, no chest thumping, just a door closing quietly from the other side. The thing about civil claims is that they become public record, and public records have a way of walking into rooms before you do. A family friend texted my mother Tuesday afternoon asking if everything was okay. Someone from my father's client circle called him by Wednesday. A neighbor who had once brought a casserole to Blake's engagement party suddenly wanted to know why my name was attached to a filing involving my own father. Mom called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. She texted, "Can we please just talk? Ethan has a family," I replied. Marcus Reed is the point of contact now. His number is in the email you received. Dad called Grandpa. I only know this because Grandpa told me later, over hospital coffee, that tasted like hot cardboard. He said I was humiliating him, Grandpa said. "What did you say Grandpa stirred sugar into coffee he would not drink?" I told him he should have thought about that before he cashed the first check. Then he hung up. Blake sent me a message on Instagram, not a text. That told me he had checked my profile first, probably thinking about optics before remorse. I didn't know about the money. I genuinely didn't. I know that doesn't fix anything. I just needed to say it. I looked at it for a long time. Then I typed, "I believe you." That doesn't change what happened, but I believe you. He didn't answer. Maybe he expected forgiveness. What he got was a door cracked open, not a welcome mat. Treatment started the following Wednesday, concurrent radiation and chemotherapy, 3 times a week at St. Marcus. Dr. Ortiz walked me through every step with the same calm precision she had used from the beginning. She didn't soften the odds. She didn't dramatize them either. "You're young," she said. "Your surgical margins were clean. The trial data is promising. None of that is a guarantee, but your variables are better than most." Most, I asked. She almost smiled. "You're a biomedical engineering valedictorian. You know what statistics mean." "I do," I said. "I'm asking anyway." "Yes," she said. "Most Miles Carter, my college roommate, drove me to every treatment appointment for the first 6 weeks. He had a biotech job starting in August and still rearranged his entire life without making a speech about it once. I tried to thank him. He stared at the road and said, 'Don't make it weird. You want Panera or actual food.'" That was family, too. The civil claim settled 11 weeks after Marcus filed. My father's attorney made the first offer on a Thursday afternoon, $110,000 to avoid the cost and publicity of a full hearing. Marcus brought it to my new apartment, a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of an old brick building that smelled like coffee and rain. I read the offer twice. "What's your read?" I asked. "It's less than you're owed," Marcus said, "but the counter is yours. Can we go after all of it?" "Yes, it will take longer. It will also stay public longer." I thought about my father's financial advisory clients. I thought about the marble counters, the cracked shoes, the $400 repair that almost ended my degree. "Counter with $140,000, I said. 72 hours. They accepted within 24. The wire cleared Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee at my kitchen table. I stared at the number for a while. Then I called Miles. It came through. "Good," he said. "I'm ordering steak. Don't argue. I'm not. You're in your soul. My parents have not contacted me since the settlement. That was 6 months ago. My mother sent one text 3 days after the wire cleared. I hope someday you'll understand that we loved you in the only way we knew how." I read it in my kitchen while radiation fatigue sat in my bones like wet cement. I didn't answer right away. I thought about it for 2 days. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to make sure the version of me replying was the one I intended to live with. Finally, I typed, "I know. I also know that wasn't enough. I hope you find a better way." She never responded. My father has said nothing, no apology, no defense, no drunken midnight voicemail, just silence, which used to make me study myself for defects, and now mostly tells me about him. I've stopped trying to give his absence a cleaner name. Blake and I have talked twice. The first time, he called on a Sunday night, and I answered mostly because I was too surprised to reject it. We talked for almost an hour. Not well, exactly, carefully, like two men carrying broken glass between them. He told me he had started therapy. I thought being the favorite meant I was loved better, he said. I didn't understand it meant you were being loved. Worse. I was quiet for a while. Does that matter? He asked. That I didn't know. It matters a little, I said. Not as much as what you do now. To his credit, he didn't ask me to make him feel better. Since then, he has been consistent in small ways. He checks before calling. He doesn't mention mom and dad unless I ask. He offered to drive me to treatment once, and when I said Miles had it covered, he just said, okay, another time if you want. We are not close. Maybe we never will be in the way brothers are supposed to be, but we are speaking without performance now, which is more than we had before. I don't mistake that for healing, but it is movement. And after 22 years of standing still in the same family story, movement counts. Grandpa and I have dinner every Sunday. He still drives his 12-year-old Buick to my apartment. Even though I have offered a dozen times to pick him up, he brings something he cooked himself, usually pot roast or vegetable soup, in an old blue container with a lid that never quite seals right. We eat at my kitchen table and argue about the news like two men who enjoy pretending the argument is the point. Mostly, though, we talk about my grandmother, Margaret Hayes, the woman whose face I apparently carry in pieces, whose stubbornness my mother mistook for judgment, whose handwriting now hangs on my wall. Grandpa tells me she returned an expensive bracelet once because she thought the money should go toward employee Christmas bonuses. He tells me she laughed loudly, tipped badly until he corrected her, and never bought anything on credit if she could help it. She would have liked you, he said one Sunday. I have her eyes. More than that, he said. You have her sense of what things are worth. I'm 6 months into the fellowship now. The research is extraordinary. I spend my days in the same hospital where I woke up not knowing if I would survive, working alongside Dr. Ortiz and a team of researchers studying the mechanisms that make tumors like mine resist treatment. The irony is not lost on me. The disease that collapsed my life is also the thing I'm spending my life studying. I don't know what to call that, so I've stopped trying. My own treatment continues. The latest scan showed no new growth. Dr. Ortiz used the word encouraging, and I have learned to hold that word exactly as heavy as it is. No more, no less. I live alone, and I like it. My apartment has good light, uneven floors, and a bookshelf I built from a YouTube tutorial using the wrong screwdriver for 40 minutes. I cook actual food now. I bought a pair of boots at full price and did not calculate what else I was losing. Grandma Margaret called the account my freedom fund. Freedom to leave what harms you. Freedom to stay where you are valued. Freedom to build something that belongs only to you. I framed her letter in a cheap black frame from the drugstore. For now, it is exactly what it needs to be. I collapsed in front of 3,000 people on what was supposed to be the best day of my life, and I woke up to the only person who had stayed. The rest of it, the money, the lawsuit, the settlement, the Paris photos, the text from my father demanding that I answer because they needed me, was not the real story. Not the deepest one. Anyway. The real story was my grandfather's hand around mine, the navy suit he had not changed out of for 3 days, the silver tie gone crooked, the pocket square I had folded for him that morning, still tucked into his jacket like he was waiting for the ceremony to start again. The real story was a 76-year-old man sitting beside a hospital bed, refusing to leave because somebody needed to be there when I opened my eyes. When I finally looked up the definition of family, the real one, not the one my parents used like a receipt they could cash whenever they wanted, it fit him exactly. Everything else was paperwork, and I had very good documentation. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more emotional Reddit-style family stories about betrayal, survival, and the people who actually show up.